Ridley Scott's The Last Duel is split into three: the truth according to Jean de Carouge, the truth according to Jacques Legris, who rapes Jean's wife, and the truth according to Lady Marguerite, the wife herself. The movie is heavily inspired by Akira Kurosawa's 1950 masterpiece Rashomon, which also concerns a rape and a subsequent fight to the death. Maybe. You see, Rashomon's 4 eyewitness accounts completely contradict each other. Objective truth is presented only as a mirage, yearned for but always out of reach. Its core philosophy was summed up best by Kurosawa himself in his autobiography.
Human beings are unable to be honest with themselves about themselves. They cannot talk about themselves without embellishing. The script portrays such a human being that cannot survive without the lies to make them feel they are better people than they really are.
This definitely applies to The Last Duel, but unlike Rashomon, the broad strokes of its plot play out largely the same way every single time. The movie doesn't want us to wonder who is telling the truth because they all kind of are. It especially leaves no ambiguity around the rape itself. Even in the section told from Jacques' point of view, there's no doubt what this is. What changes from perspective to perspective is the way each of these characters interpret these events. Rashomon and most of its imitators usually focus on the events of a single scene or day. Each story in Rashomon itself only takes about 10 to 20 minutes of screen time, but The Last Duel spans 16 years, and each chapter lasts between 40 and 50 minutes. Its protagonists are basically telling their life stories, so they have to pick and choose which moments are relevant and which ones are not. The focus is less on what did or didn't happen than it is on the larger narratives these characters are trying to construct. Jean sees his life as a series of insults. He saves Jacques' life, who then turns around and takes his land, then his title, and then his wife. Jacques basically sees himself as a victim of Jean's jealousy. Jacques saves Jean's life and then goes on to earn the land and title, which Jean loses because of his own spiteful petulance. When Jean lashes out one too many times, Jacques feels entitled to act on his feelings for Jean's wife. What is far more important than what is shared are the details that each man leaves out. Jean always glosses over the moments when he loses his temper, and Jacques barely includes any early scenes with Jean to downplay their friendship, making his good fortunes seem less like a betrayal. We get the sense that they are lying to themselves as much as us.
Let there be no ill will among the servants of the king. He needs us all right now.
Hear, hear. Well spoken, old friend.
Let there be no ill will among the servants of our king. His Majesty needs us all right now.
Well spoken.
The narrative becomes a game of identifying each man's blind spots, the details that the men either intentionally forgot or simply didn't think were important enough to remember. The rape itself ultimately matters only as the climax in a feud between two wounded egos. They structure their stories as a conflict between men.
I will not allow this to go unpunished.
If you lose this duel, your wife would suffer dire consequences.
I am not afraid.
And hereby do accuse the same Jacques Legris.
For one of my name. I'm not a coward.
That the said knight has falsely and wickedly lied.
Lady Marguerite isn't a person in either of their stories. To Jean, she's a devoted piece of property. To Jacques, she is a prize to be won. For the most part, the only time Lady Marguerite speaks in their sections is when she's affirming these preconceptions.
I know how powerful you are, but I will miss you. They will admire you as a knight. And you will confound those who had not expected you to return, Sir Jean.
From what I have heard, you have no trouble acquiring beautiful women.
You are quite talented when it comes to flattery. Yet he is of so pure a heart, he's able to claim the Grail. Ich bewundere was.
When her own marriage is being settled, she is silently sitting in the background. When Jacques decides she loves him, she's at the other end of the party. We are made to feel how incomplete this story is without her reactions. And yet, in a patriarchal culture like medieval France, this is the only story that counts. The Last Duel is actually 3 tellings of 2 stories. The all too familiar story of 2 men fighting each other over a woman, and a story of 1 woman against the world. A world that is only interested in that first story. Lady Marguerite's husband, rapist, mother-in-law, best friend, and government all turn on her at the slightest inconvenience. Every decision she makes on her own is criticized or punished. She has no one to talk to, and even if she did, we get the feeling that she would struggle to articulate what was wrong. As we've seen in part 1 and 2, so many forces are keeping Lady Marguerite down, and she spends a lot of time struggling to know how to react to this hostility. Words like patriarchy or toxic masculinity obviously didn't exist back then. Lady Marguerite has blind spots of her own, and as she runs the gauntlet of what feels like every facet of rape culture, she goes from being scared there's something wrong with her to being absolutely certain there's something wrong with the world around her. The Last Duel uses the blind spots of its abusive male protagonists to explore the blind spots of the society of which they are respected members. Much like The Green Knight, The Last Duel asks, what exactly is honor, and who is it good for? I said before that even in the section told from Jacques' point of view, there's no doubt that Lady Marguerite was raped, but Jacques himself would disagree.
In the name of God, and on the peril of damnation of my soul, I am innocent of the crime!
To his dying breath, he really believes in his innocence, because during that encounter she may as well have not even been there. He just decided how she felt about it for her.
Do not feel badly, my love. We could not help ourselves.
The use of the Rashomon effect paints a staggering portrait of just how epic of a scope rape culture really has. From the courtroom to the bedroom, from doctors' prescriptions to the locker room talk shared between bros, the way that even women wind up perpetuating it out of shame for their own silence and complicity. The first 2 sections show us the heights of the hierarchy that Lady Marguerite is unknowingly threatening. Every obstacle she faces feels directly connected to these earlier chauvinistic moments.
If you run, I will only chase you.
Come. If you run, I will only chase you.
We see the preparations for the duel at the beginning of the movie, and at the time it feels like we're being hyped up for some conventional macho mayhem, but when the duel finally plays out, we see it through Lady Marguerite's eyes. In a clever reversal of how many of our contemporary movies play out, the final battle between the men is only important to us because of how it affects the woman. Lady Marguerite is confined to passively observing the final battle, but this time, the audience's primary emotional connection to the scene is her terror, her utter lack of agency. And this shift in perspective makes it impossible not to reflect on the utter pointlessness of the duel itself, and the larger system that has decided this is what justice looks like. A system whose leaders are all in attendance, watching and cheering as if it were a football game. Jacques does die, and Lady Marguerite is vindicated, but it's an ambivalent relief. He's only punished because her husband was already looking for any excuse for revenge, because they were successful in going over Count Pierre's head to get an audience with the king, because the king allowed them to invoke some outdated law, and because of the sheer random chance that Jean won the duel itself. If Jean had slipped or swung at the wrong second, all of these cheering people would have just as happily burned her alive. The whole thing was pure luck, and even in victory, she becomes a prop for her husband's triumph. The horrifying lesson that Lady Marguerite learns is that she probably never should have spoken up to begin with. Nobody ever really saw her anyway.